This episode is brought to you by our good friends at NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. I'm sure by now you've all gotten back into your Sunday routines, but they could be even better. With NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get the most live NFL games all in one place, every game, every Sunday. And you can even watch up to 4 different games at once with multi-view, one of my favorite inventions of this decade. It's exactly what you need to catch all the action, make your Sundays more magical, and also YouTube TV is great. I got it this year. It's awesome. Sign up now at youtube.com/BS. Device and content restrictions apply. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Chaps Reacts, where we react to something that's just happened in and around the den. And today we are reacting to Millwall announcing that Daniel Kelly will be joining the Lions from January 1st from Celtic. We're going to talk a bit about Daniel Kelly, what we can learn about him, and there is no one better to tell us than a hardcore Celtic fan. So a massive welcome to yourself, Paul, who joins us from the Celtic State of Mind podcast. Hey, Paul, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here. Talk about yet another one of our fledglings flying the nest to English football.
Yeah, well, I mean, before we get into it, just a big thank you for coming on. Really do appreciate it. And it was this still seems to have been bubbling for a little while, and then obviously it kind of got officially announced. I think the Daily Record broke it yesterday. So yeah, I'll jump straight in. Tell us a little bit more about Daniel Kelly.
Daniel Kelly seemed to be alongside the likes of Rocco Vata last season. He was the next batch, if you like, of young talent coming through the Celtic Academy. Made his first team debut and made a right good impression. He scored his first goal against Dundee. He came on for the captain that night, and although we were in great form and it was 6-0 at half time, believe it or not, he came on, scored a goal, made a big impression. So he and Rocco seemed to be the next two in line to step into the first team squad, get some game time, and you would be looking at guys like that this season to really make an impression. You know, having broken through, and then they may have had some kind of involvement in the Champions League because of the homegrown player rule. Undoubtedly, if things had gone his way, he would have been one of the young guys that was in the squad, I would have expected. But again, it's disappointing, and we'll talk about this. It's disappointing as a Celtic fan when there's a young guy like Daniel Kelly or Rocco Vata, who just left for Watford, who have been at the club for a great many years. I mean, Rocco Vata leaves at 19. He's been at Celtic for 10 years through the academy system. And then, you know, as soon as he goes into that final year of his professional contract, English clubs can come in and speak to him. And English clubs are prepared to offer more money. And that's a big issue at the moment for any Celtic youngster coming through. There's a glimmer of hope with Rocco Vata. He's away. Same thing happens with Daniel Kelly. To a lesser degree, Boston Lawal. You know, slightly different way with that player because we brought him in from Watford, developed him for 2 or 3 seasons, and he's away to Stoke City. So, yeah, it's frustrating. But I think what you've got in your hands, because it looks as though the deal will go through, is one of the best Scottish talents at the moment. You know, he's only 18 years of age. Great attributes as a defensive or an attacking midfield player. And again, we can discuss this. If he isn't in the Celtic first team, there's no really any other place for him to go. The way that the Scottish setup is, our league structure is that we don't have a reserve league. I know down south I've got a very competitive under-23 league. We don't have that. So Celtic and a few of the other Scottish teams put in B teams into the pyramid, but they're not allowed to be promoted out of the 5th tier. So you've got 18-year-old kids like Daniel Kelly, bossing it against teams that just are not at the same level. And there's a ceiling, there's no pathway. So I think a lot of the kids are becoming frustrated with that as well, to be honest. And until there's big changes with the structure of the Scottish game, I fear that we will continue to lose young kids like Daniel mainly to clubs down south, but we've also lost them to Bayern Munich and further afield as well.
That's really interesting. I didn't realise, I'm going to be honest, I didn't realise that was how the Scottish football pyramid was set up, so to speak. So, yeah, I guess you can understand the desire to be more in and around the first team setup, but it felt like he was, right? He was going to be this season, which I guess made the move even more surprising. I mean, when you saw the link to Millwall, it's not a natural link between the two clubs. What was your impression when you saw that?
Well, again, as soon as I hear any of the clubs, I think of links between the two teams. And being a kind of an old school Celtic fan, I remember Mick McCarthy, Tony Cascarino, Paul Hartley, in actual fact. But, there hasn't been that many links between the clubs. But Millwall, again, as a Celtic fan, we know in terms of the structure and the finance of the English divisions that even if we were to try and sign a player, there are many championship clubs down south who would be able to match or even better our wage offer. And that's a big issue because we need to have a structure, of course, within the wage structure. We need to have that at Celtic, even though we're a cash-rich club. But at the same time, when you're looking at a young player, to give you a kind of idea, we went to America. There was 4 or 5 youngsters went with us. And to be honest, every one of them showed up well. But they guys, if they're not signing a new contract beyond the age of like 18 or 19, like where Daniel Kelly is right now in his development, they're probably on less than £1,000 a week. Whereas if you go down to Millwall or if you go down like Rocco Vata did to Watford, these clubs can offer that young player a huge amount, life-changing amount of money over a 3 or 4 year period. Now, a lot of them, and I'll give you some of the names over the last few years because this has happened a lot of them don't go on and progress and, really smash it and play at the top level in a top league. But for that 3 or 4 years, they're making life-changing money. And then for about maybe 10 or 12 years after that, they can find their level somewhere. And a lot of them come back to Scotland or they go to Rochdale or they'll end up somewhere like that. And then they'll play their career out on decent wages. But they've made that 4 or 5 year start. And I'm not saying Daniel Kelly's in that bracket because he was a shining light. And yeah, he was left out of the squad to go to America. That was the first sign that Celtic were playing hardball with him. And then at that point, you think, we're going to lose this kid. Because I don't know about you, but I look at the generation these days and I don't think they would react too well to that. Take me to America. Thanks. All right, I'm in the last year of my contract. I'll speak to Millwall. I'll speak to other clubs. And I don't know what the financial deal is going to look like, but it'll be making a lot more than £1,000 a week.
And I don't normally like to talk rumours, if I'm honest, but the Daily Record put out this morning that he, again, don't know how true this is. It's just that's the source, that he rejected a $5,000 a week deal with you. So my assumption is we're paying him that at very least, if not more, and that we've paid $275,000 to secure his services from January. Let me start that again. We were prepared to pay $275,000 to get him now, but you wanted close to double that, which is why he's going to join in January just naturally. So. What does he do in that meantime? Like if because he's not going to be involved with you, right? If he's moving on.
This is the thing. And, you look at what Brendan Rodgers has said about the player. When he breaks into the first team, is gushing with praise about Daniel Kelly, and Celtic fans get excited. Homegrown talent. We've got a tradition of that right back to the beginning of the club. And then obviously our greatest teams were homegrown teams. So whenever someone breaks through, you get excited about it and you look forward and you think, right, get the deal done. So Brendan Rodgers was speaking very positively, as you would expect. But then that kind of tone changed when we went to America. He was left out the squad. And he was talking about, players like, Daniel Kelly, Rocco Vata, Boston Lawal, who we were all very excited about as Celtic supporters, but he was trying to temper our enthusiasm to a degree. And he was talking about, I've, coached at elite levels in football, and I know that the standard is here, and I know what these guys need to get to get to that level. So you can try and read between the lines, but going back to the finances, if we were to compare it to the Rocco Vata deal, so there's a kid who's 19, got a bit of first team experience similar to Daniel, sitting on the bench with him, coming through at the same time, his contemporary. He was offered $8,000 a week to stay at Celtic. He's been described as a generational talent. At international level, he's scored goals at every single level for Ireland, right up to 21s, playing ahead of himself. And he was offered £8,000. He goes down to Watford in a deal that gives him over $20,000 a week. So you see the disparity. Now, £8,000
we won't
a
be
week.
paying him that, Paul. I can assure you.
No.
Millwall don't have the budgets to pay 18-year-olds 20 grand a week.
Well, the thing is, the big issue that we've got is, you could say Celtic have got the budget for it, because I know, at this moment in time, we are very cash rich, very well run financially. But if you give one kid 20 grand a week, then every season you might have 2 or 3 coming through. And our wage structure is such that some first teamers don't get that. Our biggest earner is Callum McGregor, the captain of the football club, and he doesn't even make 40 grand a week. So you're not going to bring an 18, 19-year-old in at that level. So I think between 5 and 8 for a club like Celtic, it's reasonable. The problem we have is we leave it to the last year of these young guys' contracts, and then they're already speaking to other clubs. Their agent is already actively looking and pursuing other options. And then they get a site or something that could be, let's say, between 5 and 10 grand a week. And if they've been left out the American tour, they might think, well, I'm not going to progress here. But in answer to one of your questions there, what is he going to do between now and January? He's going to be playing football at the 5th tier in the Lowland League in Scotland. Now, it's not a good standard. It really is not a good standard. The Celtic team that plays in that league are basically a youth team, and you're allowed to play one overaged player. So last season, we had James McCarthy playing in the Lowland League. And, in essence, that would have given an experienced player an opportunity to keep fit, and maybe some of the young guys would learn from playing alongside an international footballer. But it's not a system that seems to be working that well up here. And, for Daniel Kelly, it'll be a process of keeping fit. He's head and shoulders above anybody else in that team and in that league at the moment. So I think it'll just be a process of him keeping fit. I hope he's not frozen out. I don't think that would be fair for a youngster to be frozen out. So he'll probably play out the season or the year right up to January in the 5th tier of Scottish football.
It's a shame that they can't come to an agreement to let him go earlier. Obviously, it sounds like we're around 250k apart in terms of what we're prepared to pay and you want to receive. But we'll have to just see how that plays out. Let's talk a little bit more about his abilities then. So my understanding, and keep me honest here, he's a central midfielder. He's a box-to-box style sort of number 8, if you like. I think he's left-footed predominantly. And I think for Millwall fans, he's someone that Neil Harris, in his post-match interview last night after the win against Portsmouth, said that he's not someone that's going to come straight into the team. I would imagine he'll be in the setup, if you like. He'll be training with the first team and we'll see how he goes. But he's probably a bit of a long-term successor for George Saville. So a lot of our central midfielders, Paul, they're quite samey in the sense that they're quite defensive, that they're predominantly players that will try to win the first and second balls, tackles, interceptions. We haven't had a midfielder that scored more than 3 or 4 goals for some time now. It was George Saville back in his first spell with us. So I see him as that kind of, that evolution of our playing style and being a box-to-box midfielder. But could you just give us a little bit more on, in the times you have seen him play, what you think he's offered?
Yeah, we cover the games live. So we've seen every minute that he's played for the first team. And when you think about succession planning, the type of player I was looking at that he would be nurtured to hopefully replace, if we did that properly here, would be Callum McGregor. Now, Callum, when he came into the Celtic setup, was far more offensive And he's been refined down the years. And obviously with the passing of time as well, he has become more of that defensive midfielder for Celtic with Rio Atati and Matt O'Reilly in front of him. And it's interesting how the evolution of football terminology changes through the years. And we now describe players as a 6, an 8 and a 10. And you think, right, the 10's more attacking. The 8 might be that box-to-box, doing a bit of the leg work, and the 6 is more the defensive style player. I would describe him as an 8 in that respect. So you said box-to-box. He is going to get goals. He showed that. He scored with his weak foot. An absolute cracker against Dundee last season. And by the way, Dundee, I know maybe down south, not a big name, but they were a good side last year. You know, they were top 6 and they've started off really, really well this season. They're under a good manager in Tony Docherty. So Daniel Kelly, you're looking at a young player, as you say, still developing, but when he comes in, he is an attacking threat. He definitely is an attacking threat. And I think also one of the interesting things that I observed last season is that he had come in during a Scottish Cup game, and sometimes the early rounds of the Scottish Cup can be, you know, one at a canter because you're playing clubs from the lower leagues in Scotland. And he came into that game against Buckie Thistle, and you kind of thought, all right, he's passed that test. He then plays against Dundee, comes on, scores the goal. But then there was a different test that followed that up, and it was at Tynecastle. So Tynecastle's a toxic atmosphere when Celtic play Hearts in Edinburgh. And, you know, he's on the bench and things were not going our way that day. We had a sending off. We had a penalty against us that we'll debate forevermore. And Brendan Rodgers threw Daniel Kelly into the mix. And I remember watching that game thinking to myself, this is the biggest test. Buckie Thistle, he can do that. Dundee, no problem. But Tynecastle against Hearts, when you're 2-0 down, that's a big test. And he didn't hide. You know, the brave midfield players that actually show for the ball constantly. And he did that. You're watching him at an age of 18. You're thinking, really impressed. Although it was probably the worst game to watch him in, you saw probably more attributes that day than you did in the other matches. So, yeah, you are in for a player who is capable of getting goals. But when it comes down to the difficult work, the dirty work, if you like, in the midfields, the engine room, he's also... You know, he's more than capable of doing that type of work as well.
So it sounds like he's obviously, again, caveat that he's young and he's developing, but he's got a bit of it all in the centre of the park. You know, he'll get forward. I saw the goal actually that he scored, a really nice sort of curling finish into the corner. And it'll do the dirty work, which, you know, Millwall fans will love, given that's the sort of player we like. And I guess you don't get linked with some big European clubs like he has done, albeit probably their development setups. I think Leverkusen was one, without being a decent player, do you, Paul?
Well, this is the thing. And we've had players in our setup who have been linked to German football, further afield, French football. Karamoko Dembele went to Brest. Rocco Vata, when he signed for Watford, apparently had 15 offers, and some of them were in Italy. So, you know, we've also lost players to Bayern Munich. But like you say, they go right into the second team, the youth setup, and then they're developing through that structure. But yeah, it's the cream of the crop that are attracting that type of attention. And, you know, as soon as a player, this is a big frustration for me, as soon as a player gets into that final year of their contract, their professional contract, you just know the vultures start circling Celtic Park. They look at a player like Vata or Kelly, who have maybe been at the club for 10 years. They've developed, they're ready for first-team football, but we can't offer them it on a regular basis. And we don't have that reserve, the classic reserve setup that we used to have in Scotland. And you look at, you know, the prospect of going to one of these teams and getting minutes in your legs. And I think that no one can blame him. I don't think he's dug his heels in, been difficult, any of that kind of thing. He's a big Celtic fan from a Celtic supporting family. Yep. A lot of people in the modern day probably don't think that's important, but at Celtic, it still means something to us.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at the clubs that have been interested in this player, I think that Millwall have, you know, it's a bit of a coup for Millwall to get this player. Some eyebrows might be raised up here, a wee bit up here, you know. What do we know about Championship football down south? You know, it's a wee bit like yourself. You're so focused on Millwall, you might not understand a lot of things that are happening up here in Scotland. but the setup down there could really give him a platform to thrive. I always go back to our captain, Callum McGregor. Now, he did not break into Celtic's team as a young player. And we loaned him out to Notts County. He went down there for a season and a half. He played alongside Jack Grealish, and he was brilliant. You know, he was getting a lot of the supporters, players of the year and all that kind of stuff. By the time he came back to us, and unfortunately Daniel won't, he was 21 years of age before he kicked a ball for Celtic, which is incredible now when you look at him 10 years on, just about to make 500 appearances for the first team. And I wish we had done something similar to Daniel Kelly, maybe a year ago, put him out on loan, getting him the game time, and that's the pathway to come back to Celtic. Obviously, it's not happened that way.
And you touched on there about his similarities to Callum McGregor. I know Daniel Kelly's a kid, right? And, you know, you can't sort of stretch too far. But do you know anything about his character? Is he a leader type mentality? Can you see that in terms of the way he approaches the game? I don't know if you've ever met him or anything like that. I'm not sure. But is there anything you know about his character?
We've not met him in the kind of press conference arena, simply because I don't think Brendan sends the younger guys into that setup. However, some of the ACSOM contributors do go to the B team games, and the word you use there, leader, that's exactly what he is. And he stands out within that environment, not only as being a leader, but being far too good for that level. Because as I say, for people watching and tuning in who are immersed in English football, we're talking fifth tier of the Scottish game. You know, the pyramid was opened up fairly recently in Scotland, allowing clubs to finally drop out of the fourth tier. You know, clubs that they could be bottom of the league for 50 years and never get relegated. So Scottish football opened that up, and some ambitious clubs have started making their way through the pyramid, and other less ambitious clubs are dropping into the fifth and the sixth and the seventh tier. So, you know, I would caveat that by saying he is playing at a poor level and a poor standard in Scotland, but he is only 18, playing against fully fledged players who have got a career elsewhere, maybe in a higher league in Scotland. But yeah, leadership is one of his big qualities, and he doesn't hide. I keep going back to this Tynecastle game, where it would be easy for a young kid to come on, the game's already lost, he'll hide, he'll show for passes when he's standing behind another player and the pass isn't on. He didn't do any of that. He was shown for the ball every time. So yeah, got a good character on the park. We didn't have the pleasure of meeting him off it, unfortunately.
No, that's super to hear from our perspective. And I think for Millwall fans, this is these signings are really exciting because, again, don't know much you know, but we have a very aging squad. And that's... We've got to rebalance it. I think it's really important for Millwall to have these, similar to yourselves, to be honest, these Millwall type characters that know the club, that get the drill, they understand what it takes to be a Millwall player, and then combination of those with some exciting young talent to bring them on. And I feel in the last couple of years we've unfortunately got that balance wrong, and we've actually got the oldest squad in the Championship at the moment. So we need to bring these type of signings through. We started that work with Idemo Maku, who we signed from Ireland, who is involved in the first team setup. We have Adam Mayer that we signed from Morecambe, again, another teenager that unfortunately has got an injury, but he will be involved in the setup. And then I would imagine Daniel Kelly will be another name that's like that. So I think for Millwall, this is an evolution of our recruitment, something that was started around about a year ago. So exciting for us for sure. So yeah, I think very exciting times for Millwall fans to see Daniel. It's a shame it's not going to be till January. Mm-hmm. But I want to segue, Paul, and ask you about another player that I would imagine you've got an opinion on, and that's Kevin Nisbet. So Kevin joined us last summer from Hibs. A deal again that had been in the offing for some time, but there were injuries and things like that I think prevented it. Finally got him over the line. Last season, in and out of the team. Again, injuries. I think the changing of managers also played its toll. And then at the end of the season, he was left out of the squad completely. Neil Harris cited, a discipline problem. And at times he's looked a little bit lazy, if I'm honest, which just doesn't wash at Millwall. You can be the best player in the world. You can tell the geezer's got absolute talent, but he can look a little bit lazy, lethargic, and possibly even overweight, and not necessarily overweight in a bad way, but maybe just carrying too much weight to do the shift that a Millwall number 9 needs to. So that's kind of how his journey started. It's a shame because I think there's a real player in there, and he clearly is a fantastic finisher. But does that surprise you, Paul? You know, what was your view on Kevin before he made his way down to the Den?
There's a couple of things in that regarding Kevin Nisbet. When he went to Millwall, he was a player that had been linked to Celtic. Again, he is Celtic minded. And there was some great pictures of him associating with the Celtic team when he was on international duty. And there was a lot of rumours that Celtic were going to sign him. And, you know, at one point, he was represented by a former Celtic player. And you kind of thought to yourself, this might be a good addition to our squad at that time. He wasn't going to come in as a first pick. There's something up here whereby there are unfashionable players within Scottish football that might actually do a decent enough job. I'm going to cite a former Millwall player called Paul Hartley. We brought him in under Gordon Strachan. Pretty unfashionable. You know, he wasn't this exotic name, and we didn't spend millions of quid to get him. And he came in and done a brilliant job for Celtic. And I think a player like Hartley at that time was probably underplayed a wee bit. And he came in with Barry Robson, another domestic player. But we won the league on the back of the two of them, being the type of player that you spoke about, whereby, you know, you get 100% every single week. And, you know, it's the application that fans can see through you. If you don't have those as a basic, then you're not going to be accepted. And when we're looking at a player like Nisbet, we were linked to him. We were linked to another big fella up here called Lyndon Dykes, who was playing for Livingston. And the Celtic fan base at that time largely were not that excited. But when you look at Nisbet at that point, he had made a really good progression in his career, mainly with a couple of Fife clubs. So he had gone to Raith Rovers, started getting the games and the goals, and he got himself a move to their city rivals, Dunfermline, continued that form, and then got the big move, if you like, to Hibs. Now, Hibs is a club that, you know, we've signed a lot of players over the years from Hibernian. And, you know, they do have this knack of nurturing players and then often selling them on. So I think, again, going back to who Kevin Nisbet was linked to prior to coming to Millwall, big clubs were linked to taking him in. He'd broken into the international setup. And like you say, the technique was always there. He had a couple of bad injuries. Now, the other thing I'm going to pick up on is you were talking about like attitudinal issues and the weight issues. There was a couple of scenarios when he was at Dunfermline. I don't like the term downing tools, but when he wanted a move to Hibs, he forced the move. So when he wanted out of that club, he made it happen. And then a similar thing happened at Hibs. So in terms of that attitude that you talk about, I think if things aren't going his way or if he wants to move on, he'll make it known. And that will undoubtedly affect his state of mind. It will affect his performances on the park. And it sounds as though he's in that kind of mindset at the moment if he's not putting in the performances or even getting into the squad. It's unfortunate for me because you want to see young guys going down south and flourishing. It's a great advert for the Scottish game, which is often lambasted or laughed at or called tin pot. So if someone goes down south, you want them to make an impression, but you also want them to do well so that they can do well for the international team. And you look at the options or lack of options we had during the Euros up top. Nisbet was in and around the squads. And it's unfortunate to see that a player's career is maybe gone a bit awry, gone off the rails a wee bit. If that is the case, he might end up back up here. But again, I'm going to go back to the finances. There's only so many clubs that could probably match his wages now up in Scotland. Celtic at this stage wouldn't be in the running to bring him back up the roads. Rangers are in kind of financial peril at the moment. I don't think they would be interested. And then you get down to the likes of Aberdeen, Hibs and Hearts. Their budgets are quite low. So it's unlikely that he would make that step back up to Scottish football. He would probably end up joining another side down south, maybe even in the same league as Millwall.
Yeah, and it's a frustrating one because he has shown glimpses of being an excellent finisher. which, you know, I've seen some of his goals when he was up in the Scottish League. That's ultimately why we signed him. He does have a physical presence. You know, he's got, I think, all of the attributes needed. He's not the quickest, but you know, that's fine. But for some reason, it just isn't working. I hope that this is the season that changes and it does work. Challenge is he probably got at least 2 strikers ahead of him, and we're trying to sign another one. So where that leaves him, I don't know. I think it was pretty telling that last night against Portsmouth in the Carabao Cup, no reason for him not to start, let alone feature, and he didn't even come on in any way, shape, or form. So we'll have to see, mate, where he ends up. And I don't think another Championship club would take him. He's not shown enough at Championship level to warrant that. So we'll have to see where he is come August 31st. But you touched on there that Rangers are in financial difficulty. Going to be totally honest with you, I don't claim to know a lot about Scottish football and the sort of current state of affairs. I'm sure Millwall fans would be interested in just hearing a little bit around what's going on at the moment and, you know, how the old firm derbies are, etc.
Well, just a wee breakdown on that, and I'll do it balanced. You know, it's one of these things in football.
That'll be hard.
Yeah, I know it's easy. It's easy to have a dig and all this stuff, but basically, you know, if we rewind back to 2012, which was a massive moment for Scottish football, and Rangers got into a real issue in terms of unpaid taxes, and you know that resulted in administration that really, for a club like Rangers or Celtic up here in Scotland, is unthinkable. You know, because it's not as though we look down at the Premiership in England and we think, wow, it's like a house of cards built in sand. You know, all it takes is a relegation, and it can be really tough for a team and financial issues, etc. But up here, you know, we've got a stadium packed out with 60,000 every week. Rangers have got 50-odd thousand every week. We're playing in Europe. There's fan bases all over the globe that support Celtic and Rangers. So a massive institution in Scottish football. Unthinkable, really, that they would go out of business. You know, you never thought that could happen. You really didn't. And I think a lot of Rangers fans didn't think it would ever come to pass. But it did. So the administration goes through the process. They go for a CVA, which is refused, and then they're liquidated. And at that point, you know, you're thinking, the landscape of Scottish football is going to change here. What is going to happen? All these discussions were in place between all the clubs, the SFA, and at that time, what they were calling a Phoenix Club. So they were basically going to set up a new Rangers, if you like. They were going to drop into the Scottish Premiership, and we could just continue. And everything's been wiped, and there's no debt. And to be honest with you, a lot of the heads of Scottish football wanted that to happen. So the reason for that was sponsorship, broadcasting deals.
Money.
You've mentioned a term there, the old firm. So up until that moment, the 2012, everything that was sold out of Scottish football was under that banner, if you like, you know, broadcasting to Sky TV, sponsorship for the 3 trophies, etc. So this is when I go back to being balanced. Celtic fans no longer recognise it as the old firm, because in 2012, when Rangers were liquidated, Celtic, as a football club and as a fan base, looked at it and said, right, that's it, they're done. Their trophy hall can stop there and we can continue. There was a deal done, a new club was set up, and they started life in the bottom tier of Scottish football. So, you know, generally speaking, when people talk about this, they say, oh, when Rangers were relegated or when Rangers were demoted. That's not what happened. The Rangers that everybody knew were liquidated. A new entity was set up. They started life in the bottom division. And then there's this process of getting them into the Premier League up here to, you know, reinvigorate the rivalry and all this kind of stuff. Obviously, that's happened. You know, they've gone through a plethora of managers. Mark Warburton gets them into the league. Steven Gerrard wins them the league. But in doing so, they have spent a hell of a lot of money. So since 2012 to 2024, they have spent massive amounts of money to get back in to the top division in Scotland. And in doing so, they've had some success. I mean, some of the European runs that they've had, they've got to a final, which Celtic have not done in that period. And they've had some real success. Steven Gerrard's time at the club winning the league. But they've spent so much money to a point where now it's almost like a coming together of all the worst case scenarios possible for the club. So in the summer, they were doing some work at Ibrox. That work's been delayed. They've had to go to Hampden to play their home games. You would need to ask a Rangers fan this about last night when they were knocked out of the Champions League qualifier. But surely playing at Hampden would have been an effect, a negative effect. Had they been playing at Ibrox with the home fans, it would have been a completely different animal. So that's affecting them. They're obviously having to pay rent for the National Stadium. They'll be losing out on hospitality and corporate, etc. So that's hitting them in the pocket. Just earlier this month, there was a big legal action by their former kit manufacturers. It was settled out of court for £7 million. They've been selling a lot of their top assets. And when they were spoken to, the CEO was spoken to the other week there, he was talking about the situation of them not being in a good financial position and him trying to navigate the club through this and it being his biggest challenge in his working career and his professional career. So from the outside looking in, people still see Celtic v Rangers, big rivalry, two massive clubs, but they are teetering in terms of the financials. And I think a result like last night is huge because you win that game, albeit there's another round, you get into the Champions League, you're talking tens of millions of pounds. You know, just to put it into perspective, Celtic beat Feyenoord in the Champions League last season. It was what we would call a dead rubber. You know, we couldn't qualify. It was the final game of the campaign, and we beat them at home. But the money that we got for that victory almost was more than what we got in prize money for winning the Scottish League. And that was one victory in the Champions League. So financially, it's massive to Celtic. It's huge to Rangers. Clement has come out and said already it's going to affect his plans in the transfer window. So in terms of them bringing guys in, they're probably looking at loans now. What does that do for Scottish football? Well, it's, again, Celtic have dominated Scottish football for a generation. You know, because we were dominating Scottish football leading up to the demise in 2012. And other than one league title, we've dominated ever since. So when you look at the fact we won a quadruple treble. We won every single cup in Scotland for 4 years running. Treble. It's unthinkable, right?
That's boring, right?
Well, to be fair, success, I'll tell you what it is for me, right? I'm probably referred to these days as a Celtic dad, right? So I'm a wee bit older. And I think back to the times when Rangers were winning 9 in a row. So whenever we win anything, I will never tire of it because, you know, you've seen the kind of dark days. But by the way, I'm not saying that the new generation of fan is entitled or anything. Absolutely not. They've been born into an era of success. They should enjoy it. And I hope they never see a period where we don't have that success. But yeah, up here in Scottish football, there's a lot that's happening at the moment in terms of the finance. The flip side of that is Celtic were taken over in 1994 by Fergus McCann, who built the club up, rebuilt the stadium, put us on a firm financial footing. And, you know, since probably 2003, we have been run so well in terms of looking at the bank balance, you know, player trading model, the success on the park. But me and quite a few of the other ACSOM contributors, we seem kind of like spoilt here, but we want more. And what we want is we want to actually look at Europe and say, right, we've got a great history in Europe, but when was the last time we did anything at that level? The last time we were in the last 16 was 11 years ago now, you know, when Juventus beat us. In fact, it was 12 years ago when Juventus knocked us out of the last 16. So that's what Celtic fans want to look at as well. Of course, once you're out of Europe, you get dragged into a title fight like we did last season. You're only focused on beating Rangers, and we become part of that issue. But yeah, at the moment, I'm confident that Celtic will win the league. It could be a clean sweep. Rangers need a lot of talent and quality in the squad that they've already got, but they don't have the finances to bring it in. So it's going to be an interesting one. I don't think we're going to have another team that's going to challenge Rangers for second position just yet. But if we were to, you would be looking at maybe one of the capital clubs or Aberdeen. You know, these are big football clubs up in Scotland, and they've not done great for a long time. You know, the last time anybody won the league in Scottish football, you have to go back to the early 80s, other than being a Celtic or a Rangers, you know. So, yeah maybe one of them need to step up. I look at the capital clubs, Hibs and Hearts. think to myself, you need to, have bigger, wider ambitions and have a vision to do it.
Is the money there to
Aberdeen,
do that though? Like with those clubs, is that the problem?
they spend it wrongly. If you look at the transfers, when they spend money, they don't tend to do it that well. Hibs have had 10 managers in a decade. Aberdeen had 3 managers in one season recently. And it just seems to be that they don't know how to have that stability of the football department in place, because they've got the support. Aberdeen are they're in a city with one football club. So they don't have the competitive edge of people going to watch. Although there are Celtic supporters clubs up in Aberdeen, I've got to note. Hibs and Hearts, great rivalry, capital city clubs. One of them should step up to the plate.
Yeah.
And in the past, Dundee United were always a strong team when I was growing up. They've just been promoted back into the league. But they all need to get their house in order, because every now and again you might get a situation, a perfect storm like this season, where nothing goes Rangers' way. They can't strengthen the squad. And maybe if Hearts push that wee bit, because if you end up second in Scotland, you have the opportunity to qualify for the Champions League. And that would be a game changer for any other club in Scotland to get to that position. It would require some investment. They've done it in the past and then sold their best talent. There's been times Hibs have had a great team, a wee bit earlier than the Nisbet days, whereby they had a crop of young Scottish players coming through, but they sold them all. Every one of them gets sold. Gary O'Connor, Scott Brown, Derek Radden, they all get sold, and that tends to be what happens. And by the way, Celtic are often guilty of being the club that goes and buys them. Yeah. So I think, Celtic are the dominant force. When you look at the bank balance and everything, it's not going to change. Celtic have got 100 million quid in the bank. We're in Scottish football. So the gap is massive. We've got the best coach we could possibly attract to Celtic in Brendan Rodgers. Got a very good starting 11, but we don't have a great depth within the squad. So by the end of the transfer window, I would like us to buy another 3 or 4. We're going to probably announce Ida in the next 24 hours or so. Big signing for us, coming from Norwich, of course, but we need another 3 or 4 like that.
Yeah. I was surprised that what I've seen of Adamida in the Championship, he's not a £10 million player, but maybe his performances up in Scotland have warranted that. I don't know.
I think what happened was when we brought him in, this is a frustration we have, and I could bore you all day about our own recruitment setup. We do have a lot of good successes. We bring in Jeremy Frimpong for 300 grand. We sell him for 11.5 million quid. We bring in Van Dijk for 2.5, and we sell him to Southampton. We've done that really, really well. But alongside that, we've brought in dozens and dozens of players for millions and millions of pounds, and it's not worked out. And when we're talking about recruitment, you go back to January, where Celtic and Rangers were neck and neck. It was a flip of a coin. I'm not going to, with hindsight, pretend that didn't happen last season. It was a very, very tight title fight. And in January, you're kind of hoping that we go out there and bring the players in that we're looking for now. And we signed Adamida. And at that stage, I think that it was a wee bit unfair on the player, but a lot of Celtic fans were a wee bit, underwhelmed by the signing. And he was on loan. But prior to us getting involved in that, there had been a loan to buy for Adamida to go to Verona. And the transfer fee that had been agreed was £3.5 million. So we were bringing a player in thinking, right, he's maybe a £3.5 million with a bit of a potential for Brendan Rodgers to tap into. He loves doing that, doesn't he, with young guys? But he came into the side and he was sensational. Scores the winner in the Scottish Cup final. Without his goals, arguably we wouldn't have won the double. So near the end of that campaign, you're thinking, all right, that's fine, just do the deal, get him signed up. And I think the first offer Celtic made was 4.5. But because, again, other clubs know that Celtic are cash rich, so they're thinking, you've got the money, you want the player, you're going to have to pay for him. That probably worked against us to a degree, but also the fact that we didn't do the business properly in January because we didn't have a loan to buy option on him. And I don't know why. I think we left it too late. We didn't have a loan to buy. And had we done that, we would have got him cheaper. But as a Celtic fan, I'm thinking to myself, pay the money. We know what he can do. Bring him in, because at the moment, we've only got one striker, and it's Kyogo. Get him in the door And, you know, if he plays for 3 or 4 seasons, last time we spent that kind of money was Odsonne Edouard when we brought him in from PSG. And he's maybe not as fashionable as a PSG graduate and all this kind of stuff. But, you know, he's proved to us that he knows what's required. Yeah, he knows what's required. Absolutely. And he's a bit of a fan's favourite. We've taken him to our hearts. And it's easy. I think a lot of Celtic fans were thinking, oh, Norwich third choice striker, he's not worth the money. And I just think circumstances kind of pushed the price up. So we pay the money, bring him in, and then get the next one in. Because I think at the moment we're looking at it. We're looking at him. We've signed a midfielder called Paulo Bernardo from Benfica, who was here last season on loan. And we've replaced Joe Hart with Kasper Schmeichel. So it's almost as if we're starting from scratch again. That's ground zero. Now we need to strengthen. Yeah. So it'll be a busy couple of weeks, I think.
I feel like there's a lot of clubs that are saying that, to be honest. You know, we are like, we desperately need 3 or 4 in that are going to come in and impact the first team now. You know, our squad is paper thin, but that's the game, and that's why we love it, Paul, isn't it? So we'll see. Definitely. We'll see how we end up. Paul, that was great. I think we've covered Daniel Kelly. I think Millwall fans will be really interested to hear your thoughts on Kevin Nisbet, and you certainly educated me on the current state of Scottish football. So really appreciate that. For those listening and they want to find out more and hear more from you, how can they find you?
Well, a Celtic State of Mind, we're on all the socials. Just recently, I had to set up a TikTok page, which I tried my best not to do, but we're on TikTok, Instagram, X, Facebook, Twitch, the whole shebang, and our channels on YouTube as well. So as well as the daily live streams, we do a weekly show called This is ACSOM, fully produced video production, where we sit down with someone who has a Celtic State of Mind. And it could be an ex-player, could be a musician, a director, a writer, a prominent fan. And it's really interesting because last week we had a player on called Rudi Vata, who's Rocco Vata's dad. He played for Celtic, but he was an Albanian immigrant. So he sought refuge whilst on international duty. Even if you're just a football fan, go and watch it. He tells a story of playing an international match for Albania, right, in the 1990s. They were playing France in the Parc des Princes, right? And it's the team who were managed by Michel Platini, and they had Jean-Pierre Papin, they had Eric Cantona, they had all these class players in the team. And there's Rudi Vata playing for Albania. Young man, 23 years of age, but he was under communist rule in Albania. So he's over in France. He basically ran away, went to the police station after the game, sought political asylum, and then he was in France. Fast forward a year, he's playing for Albania against Ireland. Celtic's manager at the time is Liam Brady. He watches the Irish team. We had Pat Bonner playing for Ireland. He spots Rudi Vata, signs him for Celtic. So it's a story of freedom through football. It's incredible. And then obviously his son was Rocco, born in Glasgow, came through the ranks at Celtic. We wanted him to do well at the club, and he's away to Watford. So anybody who doesn't want to hear the day-by-day tribulations of Scottish football, but might want to tap into some of these stories, we do have that sit-down show, kind of chat show style, every Friday night, 6 o'clock on YouTube.
Nice. Well, Paul, we'll put the link to that in the description when this goes out. So that sounds really interesting. So thank you for that, mate. And listen, thank you for coming on. I know it's it's not always the greatest thing to talk about a player that's left the club, particularly someone that you felt could have fulfilled his potential with you. But really do appreciate you coming on, and wish you all the best for the season.
And same to yourself. Good luck with the channel, mate. And if you want an update at any point during the season with regards to Daniel, you might even want to come on to my channel and speak about him, then happy to do so. Happy to do so, mate.
Oh, love that. Thank you, Paul.
Nice
Have a good day. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.